I've been involved in conservation since I was a really little kid. I grew up diving with sharks here in Australia. Now, shark conservation is something that I'm very heavily involved in. There's been a lot of decline of shark populations here in Australia. So there's been all sorts of issues around the world with sharks that I have tried to help through things like filmmaking and running small campaigns. Most recently, the project that I am now heavily involved in is one that I set up in Indonesia, where we actually employ shark fishermen and tourism and offer them an alternative source of income. So I'm quite familiar with lesser developed nations fishing for sharks and the shark fin trade, and just some of the exploitation that goes on around the world in regards to our oceans. I think it's really, really important that these images are finally getting shared. Because when we think of places like the Galapagos, we think, oh, an amazing marine park, the animals are safe, it's wonderful. And we don't realize quite often that these places are still getting affected by fisheries and communities from hundreds of miles away. It's been really interesting and actually really good to see things like this shared on social media, because I think that it's quite dangerous for us to all have this opinion that everywhere is safe and that the oceans are fine because we have these marine parks and these marine zones where animals can move freely without the threat of overfishing. That needs to be taken out of our minds now. That stigma needs to be gone, because we need to realize that these places are getting affected, they are getting polluted, and they're getting fished. I think that this is a really difficult issue to tackle because it does rely on pressure from governments, in my opinion. It's going to be very, very hard for people to push for this kind of change when so much money and, I believe, corruption is involved. There's not only the idea that we should be targeting legal fishing, but this really raises a whole new issue, which is, what is legal and is that just? Like, should what's happening now even be legal? Should they even be allowed that close to a marine park? Should they be allowed to fish in foreign waters? So I think that that really makes us need to question what is legal and why it's legal. In addition to that, from what I've read and seen, obviously I'm not from Ecuador. I've never been to the Galapagos, unfortunately. I know many people that have. I know a lot of people that, say amazing things about it, but from what I've seen, it definitely seems like there is evidence of illegal activities. And it would be really, really crazy to assume that these vessels would cross the ocean, be in that area, and not be involved in illegal activity. And I know that patrolling that amount of vessels is a very difficult thing to do, checking all their hulls, making sure they're all doing legal things. And not only would it be a difficult thing to do, but it would be a very political thing to do, because once you find illegal things going on, you then have to take action against their boats. So I think it's smarter for the government to just take a step back and not get involved in that, because they obviously don't want to hurt their relations with China. It's also safe to assume the amount of bycatch that would be involved in that fishery is quite high. And as we've seen in the past with shark fins, anything where there is one species being targeted for a reason other than just consumption, like for to be shipped, to be exported, to be part of some status symbol or some medicine, there's always issues when you start to target animals like that. And a fleet this size has the ability to really affect the population there, which then in turn affects the whole ecosystems. From what I can understand, what I've seen, this is not the first time that this has happened. This happens every year. And now we're finally making it public knowledge, which is a big deal. And I think that my message is, it's time to do something. It's time to act. I know it's incredibly difficult as an individual to figure out how to do that, but it's time to put pressure on governments to preserve the marine environment, because in the end, that benefits everybody. It benefits the local communities and it benefits the wildlife. And we all need to start putting pressure on the Chinese government and supporting our own governments to stand up against them and to protect our resources for the sake of the people.